I call Andrew Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First in the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill number 3. New Zealand First will support this bill in its first reading through to Select Committee for the fact that we believe there are some areas of it which have merit, but there are other areas which do raise some alarm bells. But in so doing, we believe that the correct process will be to take it to Select Committee and allow submissions and the people of New Zealand and organisations throughout New Zealand to have input into this important bill. Mr Speaker, New Zealand only has 2 tiers of government, central government and local government. We are one of the most under-governed countries in the world in our Westminster system. Compared to Australia, we have a very limited amount of government where they have their state, local and federal governments, and then they are split as well with the Senate and that sort of thing. Here in New Zealand, we are very reliant on local government working very closely with central government and vice versa. And having grown up in a family involved in local government, where my father was a borough councillor in Waipukurau back in the 1960s and 70s, and to see how local government evolved in those days of the small boroughs, and many people in this room perhaps don't give sufficient recognition to the fact that communities have grown around New Zealand as a result of the hard work of local representatives, local community representatives, who have helped develop their communities, develop their villages, their towns, their districts into what they are today. And New Zealand wouldn't be the proud nation it is today with the quality of life that we have today if it wasn't for those local representatives, communities working with their people in their community to develop their particular place of living. And in that respect, it is disappointing that this government often seems to put down local government and make out that it's just not functioning and is not playing its part in the important fabric of New Zealand society. It is, and when I look at some of the recommendations in this bill, I almost think it's like the government trying to tell local government how to suck eggs. They basically are trying to give a lecture to local government when in most cases not one of them sitting on the other side of that room has actually had any experience whatsoever. I said most of them, I didn't say all of them, I said most of them have had little or no experience in local government. And in that respect, where they say this will encourage and facilitate shared services and joint delivery, well, I can inform them that this has been going on for many, many, many years. And I can tell you, before the Auckland amalgamation of the Auckland councils, there were shared services over many areas of Auckland, across many of the councils, in recycling of rubbish, in libraries, in control of animals and pets, in environmental issues across our beaches and across our environmental discharges, in terms of all sorts of water supply arrangements and various other things, sewerage outlets and all that. There were shared arrangements going on all the time. The same can be said for other authorities around New Zealand, and we heard at the submissions earlier in the year on the earlier local government bill in terms of what was happening in the likes of the Bay of Plenty amongst the many councils there, already working collaboratively to share services, the Waikato, other areas around New Zealand already working together to share services. So in a sense this is coming in, and this is putting it in black and white, but that is already happening, and I know that local government New Zealand is already doing a good job in working together across the regions and providing supportive services from local government New Zealand to assist local authorities throughout New Zealand to work more collaboratively. It also talks here about long-term council plans being easier to read and less voluminous, and the Minister said they are voluminous. Well, Minister, they were voluminous because that was what was required by the law. That was required by the likes of Audit New Zealand, and that was required under the Local Government Act to be fully transparent to the people, and all the facts and figures had to be laid down in those 10-year long-term community council plans, and it was simply a fact of life. And most councils did put out a good summary. certainly the North Shore City Council that I was with, like many other of the more responsible local entities in New Zealand, put out very good summaries to assist people and put on extensive road shows and all sorts of public information happenings to ensure that people were fully aware of what was going on. So again, it's a bit, as I said, it's telling them how to suck eggs because it was going on. And sure, you had the complicated documents, but you also had the summarised documents to assist. In this day and age, with improvements in electronics and website-based information sources, this can happen far more readily. A lot of the technical background detail can be loaded onto the various council websites and accessed by the public, where in the past perhaps a lot more was printed and no longer needs to be done so. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the proposed 30-year infrastructure strategies, again, this makes out that this wasn't occurring. I can confirm that we had a 25-year forward blueprint where our City of North Shore was going and what the 25-year projected requirements were across all the various infrastructure, across the demographics, across the population, across the roading and other infrastructure. And we were the first council in New Zealand to bring out a 15-year long-term council community plan when I was mayor. And we went from a 10-year fixed plan to a 15-year plan, the first council in the country, because we recognised that a longer-term plan was beneficial to the community. At that time, we also adopted the Shand report, which came out in 2007, which recommended more intergenerational debt. And it shouldn't have been that one generation took on the debt with 15 or 20 or 25-year loans when something was being put in for a much longer purpose. And in that respect, for instance, we built a 100-year pipeline from the North Shore out to the Auckland Channel, costing $116 million. And that was taken with a much longer 50-year loan intergeneration, because in 100 years' time that pipe will still be there, and it should not just be this generation paying for that pipe, but it should be paid for through the generations. It is somewhat disappointing that this government continues to put the boot into development contributions. Certainly there have been some questions over some aspects of development contributions and the levels that they have risen to in some respects. But again, the North Shore City Council was one of the very first councils in this country to bring in development contributions, and it did so in relation to the North Shore Busway. That was a very, very expensive $100 million plus project, but which recognised the fact that with the growth of the population, the fastest growth north of the Harbour Bridge of any area virtually in the country, it was necessary to provide the public transport infrastructure and the busway infrastructure to cope with a growing population. And therefore the increasing numbers of subdivisions and sections that were going in were basically there to feed off a growing population, and a busway was required to service that. We certainly wouldn't have needed a busway with the existing population. It was for the growth in the population that was determined. And over a number of years through the court process, it was identified the level of development contributions, and as part of that, with a growing population, they have other requirements for things such as swimming pools, for things such as libraries, for other community provisions, and that's required. Cities like Dunedin, which have a flattening or even declining population, don't have the same requirements. Other provincial areas around New Zealand don't have the same level because they're not developing at the same rate. But areas like the North Shore and other parts of Auckland required development contributions, because otherwise, how could the existing ratepayers afford to provide for a very rapidly growing population? So it's almost like when you join a golf club or you join a sports club, you pay your upfront entry fee to become a member. And that's the same thing with a development contribution. You're paying your fee to buy into the club, to buy your bit of land to start your development, or to subdivide your property into cutting off the back section or whatever it is. You're paying that fee to buy into that infrastructure. So I'm sure this will have a lot of submissions, Mr. Speaker. In closing, can I just say that it was very disappointing, for instance, on the ECAN Canterbury submissions earlier in the year and others revolving around local government, that this government basically gave lip service to the submission. Many, many learned people, QCs, authoritative people with extensive local government experience came along to our local government select committee, but basically were not listened to and were not recognised, and their submissions went wanting. I hope that this will receive the full light of day with this government, that they will take on board submissions from all the various parties, and they will not just give lip service again. to what is intent. But New Zealand First does see merits in areas of this. We will be supporting it through to the Select Committee, and we hope it will be robustly debated and that the government will take on board positive, proactive contributions that come from the public. Thank you.
I call Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My pleasure to speak briefly on this bill because we do want to advance the programme